My name's Anders Varner, host of the Barbell Shrugged podcast and creator of the Diesel Dad, helping busy dads get strong, lean, and athletic without sacrificing family, fatherhood, or fitness. This clip is from our podcast down at Sorin, hanging out with Bert Sorin, the CEO himself of Sorin, and we're talking about the backstory of Sorin as well as Bert's story and how he got into strength training. For all you busy dads out there that want to get strong, lean, and athletic, we have a free PDF that you can download right now. The link is in the description. It's called the Diesel Dad 100. It's 30 free workouts that you can do in under 10 minutes with minimal equipment. We call it the Diesel Dad 100 because I want you waking up in the morning. I want you to light a fire under your ass, and I want you to start training. Get that fire back. Get that edge back. Diesel Dads, strong, lean, and athletic without sacrificing family, fatherhood, or fitness. The link is in the description. Let's get into the show. As soon as the word Sorin pops in my brain, I immediately think about like the culture that you guys have created here and how long this company has been here. I'd love to hear just at the beginning kind of talking about the early days. Sure. And then you growing up as like in the world of strength, and then how you've kind of progressed this into the next era of Sorin. But where did this whole thing start with you?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't really say where it started with me without starting with my dad, Bert Sorin. So he started Sorin in 1980, but that wasn't when he got into lifting and things like that. So kind of way back, the Wayback Machine, kind of the Tarantino, this thing. So you go back to, he was born 1950, so it was in the late 50s, early 60s. So he was a kid, wasn't very good at reading, just didn't have the knack for it. So
we were talking about last night.
Yeah. So his dad would buy him Field and Stream type magazines, outdoors magazines, hunting, fishing, stuff like that, because that's what he was interested in. But he also would buy him Strength and Health magazines. And the kind of funny again from the Muse standpoint, the reason why he liked both of those is because the movies that were on TV back then were African Queen and Hercules.
Oh, yeah.
So he would see Hercules and go big and strong.
Steve Reeves.
Awesome. Right, sure.
Yeah, totally.
And then like, hey, this kind of outdoorsy, adventure-y type stuff. So this little impressionable kid was going, these things look super cool.
Super cool.
His dad would buy him the magazines because that would make him read. And then so if you look at it from like an inception standpoint, you get a little kid that all he reads about is like kind of cool, masculine, like adventure-y stuff.
It was like before the internet, before there was like a strength conditioning blog.
Sure.
He was doing it, but through magazines.
But he was just like reading, and his mom would go, why are you buying him all these magazines? He goes, well, he's reading, ain't he?
Yeah.
And so
that's what he likes.
And she was like.
Right. And so he would just do that. And so he got into, he wanted to throw a javelin, right? He thought that was kind of cool. It's like a spear or whatever. So he was going to do that. Actually, he was lifting weights at the time. So before that, he was lifting weights because he thought it was really cool and followed the York barbell guys, the Grimmicks and the Tommy Konos and the Szymanskis, like all those, the OGs, right?
Yeah, right.
And those are the dudes he followed. And to the extent where, like, when he was 11 years old, his mom, which is crazy to think about, 1961, 62.
Bob Hoffman era.
Bob Hoffman, right?
Totally.
Put him on a train and let him go to York, Pennsylvania at 11 years old and check into his own hotel room and go to the York Senior Nationals.
Oh, my God.
And watch Bednarski hit the world record.
Yes.
Took a picture with him, saw Grimmick, met Hoffman, all those
America
cats.
was like the best then.
Right. They were the OGs, right?
Yeah.
And then the second day, they would have the York picnic, which was a cookout, and that's when kind of bodybuilding was first cracking off. So they would have the Tommy Konos and all the Grimmicks, these guys that just had lifted. They would do exhibition powerlifting stuff.
Because a lot of the bodybuilding stuff was the secondary sport to the powerlifting, the Olympic weightlifting.
Well, it was Olympic weightlifting. Powerlifting wasn't even really a thing.
It was called odd lifts.
Odd lifts.
Odd lifts.
So the guys were all snatching and squatting. They were squatting to make their snatch and clean and jerk better. So then they would have after the nationals, guys were all peaked for the nationals, and then they would go, hey, look, I could squat 600 pounds.
It still happens. Like, my guys will always compete, and then they'll go do their 1-rep max squat.
Sure. Yeah. And then that Sunday, they would literally get on stage and freaking start
flex it
out. And you're going, okay, these guys aren't bodybuilders. They're literally weightlifters that just happen to be jacked.
Yeah.
It's so funny because when I think of Sorin, and we were talking about on the car ride down here, of like, I just think of strength.
Cool.
We don't have to like partition it out. And we do this and we do that. It's like, let's just be strong.
Just be strong.
And that's the founding
right.
like culture that it was originally established.
So modern day York, I think.
Yeah, so he saw that as a kid, and he said the coolest part was he was an 11-year-old kid hanging out with all these people, and they were open, and they had this big picnic. And so if you look at it, 50 years later, that's really kind of where Summer Strong is. We work, we train, we do all this stuff hard, and then we all go hang out together.
Yeah.
Because, I've kind of taken the SET, which is struggle, eat, and talk. Those are the 3 best ways, especially done in that succession, to really bond people together. And you look at it from like the caveman days. What did they go do? They went, hey, we're going to go together. We're going to kill that woolly mammoth with a spear, and it's going to be a lot of struggle. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
We're going to sit around
Carry
the fire.
that mother trucker.
Yeah. Then we're going to sit around the fire and eat. And then we're going to talk, and we're going to regale each other with these stories and relive the hunt and all this. Like, man, since the dawn of time, that's what people did. What did we do when we were lifting? We went and trained really hard. Let's go eat.
And drink beer.
Saturday mornings, the
and
best.
Then let's just go talk about whatever dumb crap we talk about.
Whatever the training we
go
did.
to your favorite restaurant with the biggest cheeseburger.
Sure.
Totally.
Have a beer.
If you're at West Side, you go to Bob Evans every day.
Yeah, I go to Bob Evans. Yeah, with Louis, and he buys. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Totally.
So that's kind of how that started with Pops, and then he got pretty good at lifting, and so he and his buddies, they were weightlifting all the time, and Pops actually built his own platforms. He lived near a railroad went through his backyard, and so he, liberated a few of the railroad ties and would slide them down the railroad tracks, and then he would flip them over like a caber over his back fence, and he built his first weightlifting platform.
No way.
Was most of this just because there was no Sorinex around to buy equipment, and he just needed to engineer his own things to get stronger?
Yes. And there was a place called Jackson Barbell, or Jackson, I guess it was Jackson Barbell. Andy Jackson. He was a very, very, his stuff is very collectible now, but he lived like 20 miles from Pops, which is really super collectible. It was
Andy Jackson.
Yeah. So you had York, which was like the big hitters, but then you had Andy Jackson, who everything was just a little nicer.
Oh.
And so when he was a kid, so if he got good grades or whatever, his dad was a bartender, would be off on Sundays. He would take him to Jackson Barbell to the guy's house who had a foundry at his house. Yeah. And if he got good grades, he'd be able to buy a pair of 2.5-pound plates. And he was always going home. And so he built this little gym out in his basement in his backyard. His basement was for power lifts because he couldn't go overhead.
Yeah.
And then outside he had a platform that he would train overhead.
Weightlifting. That's brilliant. Yeah.
So that was what he did. And he was the only child. His parents worked all the time, so he wasn't really allowed out of the yard. So it was like, this is your world. And so Pop's like, well, I'm going to make my world awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to build the stuff out, and I'm going to read a bunch of magazines, and I'm going to go out and do the stuff.
That's awesome.
And then later on, they had the Cedar Street Boys, so they had this gym that they put in their buddy's basement. They would pay a quarter every month to work out there, and they would use that money to buy the family a Christmas present at the end of the year and all this stuff. Then he lifted at the and this all kind of ties into the story for the so it's kind of strange, but it's a lot of stuff. So then he was at the Elizabeth, New Jersey YMCA, which was a crazy gym if you think about it. It sounds like a YMCA, but
YMCAs were different back then.
They were different back then. So you had a couple other lifters. You had a high schooler, Richard Sorin. You had Dave Draper.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right before he went to – because Pops didn't even know it until I talked to Dave one day, and he goes, I lifted at the YMCA. You go, really? He goes, I left there like at 66 to go to California. And I remember Pops always saying, there was a big blonde bodybuilder. Didn't know that was him. He goes, he was just Big Dave. And I'm like, that was Dave Draper. He goes, no shit.
Yes.
And so
exactly.
But there was probably so few strong people around that if you went to a strong person gym, everyone had been there and trained so long because there's hundreds of thousands of strong people.
The YMCA back then would put on the powerlifting nationals, the weightlifting, they were strength back then.
So if you really wanted to do it, you had to go to that specific gym where there was a culture of being strong.
Yeah, and you had Anthony Datillo, who you've probably read about.
Of course.
Datillo was Pops' training partner. They were the same age.
Here in New Jersey, what gym in New Jersey?
Elizabeth YMCA.
That's
right
so
outside
funny.
of Newark, New Jersey.
Oh, it used to be even in North Carolina, you had Jack King. And he had his
gym.
it was in a YMCA. Steve Jack, my man.
Sure.
God rest his soul, rest in peace. But they had it was at a YMCA, but it was gangster. It was like
super bad.
They had cellar dwellers. You remember that there was a show that they were making about these gyms that are all hardcore.
Brookfield and Jack.
Yeah. So I trained with all those dudes. Like, Jack King was one of my first weightlifting coaches. Steve Jack. Was like just an awesome guy that hung out.
So you're born into a world of strength. What is growing up in that?
A strange world, because you got to remember, so you fast forward, I'm born in 76, and all the other kids are doing all the other kid crap.
Yeah.
You know? And then my mom and dad got divorced, so I would go over to Pops' house, and, you know, I have pictures at 8 years old, like, you know, deadlifting double body weight on Alico plates. Yeah. You know, and like what other 8-year-old in that early 80s knew that Alico was made of
like the only barbell that was capable of making it across on a barge somewhere. There was like one.
or like